15 years ago, Star Trek Pickets and Layoffs. Yes, episode number 287 of Trekland Tuesdays Live. There you go. Double the price, double the nice. Yes. Boom. With me, Dr. Trek Larry Nemecek, coming at you right here from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47 for some clarity, sanity, and the big picture in things Star Trek. And sometimes that big picture goes a ways back. Hey, it's the holiday season. I don't like to date these too much, but hope everybody is having a lot of fun out there. Still a lot going on with Star Trek. Hey, news shout out once again to Star Trek Prodigy for winning Art Director Award. They were nominated for Best Animated Series in the new Children and Family Emmy Awards. They were nominated, which is huge. They lost out, but it was an honor to be nominated and took home some other trophy too. So Prodigy is still in the spotlights. Prodigy is still turning heads, I believe, and making believers right and left. And it's not just because there is no other Star Trek right now. It's rather amazing. Again, I've been talking so subversive. I have a second opinion coming up about yet another Prodigy moment. So be looking for that on the YouTube channel. And of course, like and subscribe if you're not already on my YouTube. And spread the word. But here in this holiday season, I'm also buoyed because a lot of you were there, had an awesome, our 7th anniversary open house for Portal 47, which is free to everybody with a great guest. And need I say more, we had Ira last week. Yes, I'm working on getting the recording out first to the Portales and then to everybody. And we're going to be getting bits and pieces, some great sound bites, because there were some head spinning moments even after all this time. But I was thrilled because we had a lot of our friends across the Trek spectrum, Mission Log Live, Daily Star Trek News. I'm leaving people out. Our Roddenberry Transmitter newsletter got it out there for us too. A lot of folks were mentioning open house and that it was Ira and that you had a chance to have your questions asked and answered. And it was just an awesome night. But I had nearly 100 people register. We had over 60 on the call, which is the biggest ever so far. Nowhere to go but up, because we've got every year brings us more and more, not just great Trek, but great Trek creators who are willing to sit down and give themselves. And like Mike McMahon did last year, Ira went a little over time, like an hour and 50 minutes. I was squeezing him there the last 5 or 10. And he had a mic drop moment to leave on, which I'll just leave it at that. But everybody there was just raving about Ira. And I think the idea that I had known him off and on for so long led a comfort zone there, plus Ira's irascible wit and dry humor. But no, we covered a lot of ground. And especially what I wanted to do was some of the early years, this TNG stormy season, stormy not for him, but for everybody, which was the great turnaround year, but ironically cost almost everybody on the writing staff to throw up their hands, aside from Michael Piller and baby Ron Moore. But a lot of great story and a lot of reflections on Michael Piller, a lot of reflections on his friend Pete Fields, who was with him the first 2 years of DS9. So a great night. A lot of you were there. And I have to say also, shout out to our door prize winners. I want to do that again. Alan Huenzi, Josh Zeller, Melody Jean Mayfield, and May Borello, who all got great DVDs or great coffee table books. And that stuff is all on the way too. So again, thanks to everybody who joined us last week. I know I'm dating this one today, but I did want to say what an awesome night it was. I was very gratified. Thanks everybody. And thanks as we get down to the end of the year here. Thanks for supporting everything Trekland. And we've got, as with everything else in Star Trek, we've got big plans for next year. And while we talk about that, I'll even give a shout out to Trek Talks 2, which is coming in mid-January weekend, which is the Trek Geeks and Roddenberry Project, all for the Hollywood Food Coalition, a great cause, and there's going to be an awful lot of Trek people involved. The second edition will be even bigger than the first. I said they should call it, in honor of R.I.P. Kirstie Alley last week, they should call it Look Who's Trekking 2, but we're not there. So what's happening this week, Larry? What is this topic about? I feel like Ali when I do that. What is this topic about? Well, I thought I would turn to a little page of history, because 15 years ago Saturday, but also 15 years ago this week, was a huge momentous transition sheer time for Star Trek and the media world. Now, in the micro, not so big. The macro, not so big. In the micro for Star Trek, it was. And if any of you saw some of my social posts over the weekend, I marked the day there. I did what justice I could do because I basically need to sit down and with a photo album. We either need a slideshow of stills. But no, 15 years ago this week, the world and Hollywood was 1 month into what would turn out to be about 100-day writer's strike. And as happens, a lot of the unions, the writers, the WGA, Writers Guild, the Directors Guild, DGA, and then SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, which is now bigger than ever because AFTRA had merged, or did soon after. But the three guilds kind of get together and kind of strategize. And of course, they're dealing with the Producers Guild, which is basically all the studios and major independent producers together as kind of capital and labor. And I know a lot of people would say, oh, well, how elitist is this? But look, when you're talking about the IATSE union, which remember we were watching bated breath here just 2 or 3 years ago, and IATSE's in that mix of unions too. The IATSE guys or gals are pretty blue collar. They're the hourly workers and some of them, a lot of them are very specialized guilds. A lot of the art fields are subsets of the overall IATSE, International Association of Theatrical and Scenic Employees, if you ever wondered. But a lot of times they don't coordinate, but they sit back and someone goes first to test the waters and see, and then the others tend to pick up on that because it's not so much about the specific, obviously actors versus directors versus writers versus creative teams. A lot of times it's just taking the temperature of the water. And in 2007, 15 years ago, it was all about where we are right now. Basically, it was all about emerging new media. We weren't even thinking about streaming then. It was cable, and it was all of these new and insipid, all the things that revolutionized the way we watch media, much less where we go, what the business model looks like, and all of that. And I just remember at the time, Ron Moore's Galactica was getting big, and there were noises about some of the bonus content showing up that might be on a DVD later. And even DVDs and Blu-rays were a new thing to have bonus content. Not just go back and let's find clips, let's run the blooper reel, the gag reel, but producing original content for those mini documentaries. There was a big discussion about who was writing that, much less directing it, producing it, much less mini episodes. And this is where Galactica comes in. Mini episodes that you were finding online. Well, that was a whole new paradigm. And there was some headbutting about, well, should the writers, much less the actors and directors and down the line, should they just be expected to do that? No, they should be paid something. Well, how much? No, wait a minute. Why are we even? There was a whole debate about that. And it was emerging. It was on the frontier. And it was still new to the viewing public. But new media was kind of the driving force of what that strike was about. And the canary in the coal mine among all the guilds and unions was going to be the writers. The deal didn't even expire until, I think, May. But they called a strike vote in November. That's basically what it was. Now, it wound up going, and a lot of people, it was pivotal for one thing. For one thing, very famously in Trek terms, we remember the Writers Guild strike of about 1988, because that interrupted the flow of late first season Next Generation, caused the second season to only be 20 episodes instead of 26 or 22. Caused them to dig in and find old scripts. That's why The Child got made from Ilea and Decker to Riker and Troy. And that was kind of a lukewarm success. There have been times when the writers get out and they don't get much of what they want. There's a rebuff, and maybe there's a prevailing economic wind or something's going on. 2007, they were very savvy, the guild makers and leaders. And one of the things, kind of emblematic at the time, since the issue was largely about new media and being paid adequately, respectfully for it, and being included in the decisions and all of that, was an emerging new media. And it was new to the public as well as new to the industry. And the savvy thinkers, social media was just, I started my Facebook account in 2007. MySpace and Facebook had been around for a year or two, and they were starting to catch on. And one of the turning points about that strike, and where we get back to Star Trek, was realizing the impact, even though they didn't have a vote at the table, obviously, but the general viewing public opinion, the masses. Are they disinterested? At the very least, are they going to go on with that? Oh, those Hollywood elites, who cares what these millionaire writers and actors get? How does that relate to me? Well, a lot of them were not millionaires. A lot of them needed to work. A lot of them needed to make their points in their health plans. We're talking 2007. This is 3 years before Obamacare revolutionized that for a lot of people. And a lot of actors and directors and writers and on down the line were needing their work hours, not just for salary, but to qualify for their health plans and their pensions. And so it was a very blue collar workaday issue. If we're going to open up this whole new realm and not reimburse it, not treat it as equal. I think that was the bottom line. We're going to treat this as equal work to everything else. And the last thing that the unions wanted was to be seen as just another elite Hollywood bit. So there were some interesting plays. It's a sign of where taking the public interest into account was going to play into this decision. And the vibe, read the room, producers. What we had the public on our side, much less is the public indifferent, much less is the public looking at us like a bunch of elitists. And not only was that public out there to sway, the channels were starting to happen, because what had happened since the last big strike attempt? This was 07, 08. We had just come through the era of the Next Generation boom, the Next Generation's spinoff, with Herc and Xena and Buffy and Angel and, oh my gosh, now Galactica. There had been a revolution in genre. Basically, by the time of the Star Trek fallow years, after 07 and Enterprise canceled, it's what I call the time, like, we kind of look back now and say, well, look, the geeks won. The geeks won the social war. All the fanboys and girls were out of the closet in more and more and more ways, partly because they had buying power, purchasing power, and these shows were catering to them. It would be Twilight would be out, and Comic-Con San Diego was about to be revolutionized in 07, 08. So it's an interesting time, because even though Star Trek was in its fallow time, the world was catching on. There was a sea change happening. And, I didn't think about any of this at the time, but now it's so easy to look back. It's so easy to see this. So not only could the unions know they could appeal to that growing audience out there, and at the least not be so out of it that they didn't recognize they could be written off. At least they were so savvy to go after the public perception and sway the public wins. They also had a backlog of allies to draw from. And that is why one of the smartest PR moves the unions did was, I don't know who had the idea, but along the way, instead of just picketing the studios and everybody taking turns carrying a sign for a while, big and little alike, the high-end writers who did have the mansions, and the guys who were still struggling, and gals who were struggling to make their health plan points. That's why somewhere along the way, horror writers got together and picketed, I think at Universal. And a little later, there was a sci-fi day, and Galactica writers, then and now, and Buffy and Firefly and Angel, those writers went out and had their own picket, because what did it do? It drew press attention. It drew press attention driven by fan attention in the, yes, nascent, I can say that word, in the pioneering, the little baby step social media world, much less the old guard, message boards. Wherever you communicated your fandom increasingly on the internet with your computer, that was a force to be harnessed. And the hardcore fandom just kind of echoed out into the mainstream fandom. And you could always count on Entertainment Tonight to bring a camera crew. So even though, Paramount was party to the producers, but to give credit where credit's due, it's not like Entertainment Tonight sugar-coated or vanillaed its coverage. They covered events, and that's what these were, events. So you had horror writers, after all the years of horror and the crime, you had the genre writers like Galactica and the Joss Whedon. Yeah, I know. Joss Whedon franchises. Well, who's the granddaddy of them all? Yes. So on December 10th, it was a Monday that year, there had been organized a Star Trek day, but it was awesome because we had buttons, we had t-shirts. I say I had a sale. I was an associate member. We pitched, but we never sold anything else to pick it up. So I counted myself as an associate, frozen associate WGA member, and I proudly did it. But I was also there covering it with the old original StarTrek.com team, which was news, which was LA based at the studio. And by then, we'd had the studio divorce, Viacom. Everything of the TV side had been kicked out to the new Google building in Santa Monica. And that's where StarTrek.com was headquartered, along with what was left of licensing. Paula Block and John Van Zitters and Marion Cordry. That was about all that was standing of Star Trek in those days. So on Monday, we sent a news team out. And Mark Wade, who used to head up the team, shot video. And I have some pictures. The video was on the site, the old site, before it went into ice for 4 years, sat in a freezer, until modern day things turned around as a marketing tool, realized it. And marketing and licensing in New York now based, was able to finally get the keys from Interactive, who didn't care because they were about promoting modern shows. And Star Trek's an old show. There is no ilovelucy.com, at least run by the studio. So when it was all about promoting what was up, Star Trek was very dead. And not only was Star Trek not making, new shows, new episodes, but it was very dead by many considered to be. Many of the, in 2000 or in 2000, yeah, in 2005 and 2006, Star Trek was considered to be very, very, very dead. And okay, so folks, that J.J. Abrams guy is going to bring back a movie. What a shock. Is anyone going to come in the door? Oh, well, let him throw the money away. Well, it's Paramount's money. But shocking aside, it's never going to sustain as a TV series. Oh, it'll be 20 or 30 years before we have Star Trek back on TV, if ever. So that was a lot of the mindset. But here, in one day, the call went out. I mean, the writers were all unified anyway. And soon after, the sister unions, unions, all jumped in as supporting cause. They all vote because the way the writers went, so would they. So including especially SAG-AFTRA. So the actors were in active support, and a lot of IATSE groups. Everybody voted support for the writers because they expected within 6 months to require that kind of support too. And if the writers get it, they're not. I mean, that's just kind of the domino effect. Whatever the first one to go gets, everybody else expects that. And if not, there'd be some kind of a riot rebellion going on. So yeah, signs that could be had big white spots. You could be artful and create your own on strike Writers Guild of America. Right. But they had T-shirts to give out and buttons, and best of all, we were there covering it. Lots of folks I didn't know. But at some point over those 3 or 4 hours of the picket line, right there in front of the gates of Paramount, right there at 5555 Melrose, right along in front of the gate, you wound up having writers and actors and creatives of all kinds. Eventually, you wound up having people from all eras of Star Trek. And it was so cool. And you had people able to talk. You had reunions of old friends who'd worked together, and you had people across generations able to talk. I mean, it really was. It was like a family reunion. And I think there were a lot of writers that just showed up that day to walk the picket line because that's where it were. But it got to the point where you had fans turning up to watch, to see all these people, everybody there together and taking a minute to talk about it. I mean, I could go down the list. I wrote this story back in the day, but I had a pretty good authoritative list. But you had everybody from Harlan Ellison and David Gerald from the original series, all the way to Bob Orsi and Alex Kurtzman, who were working on, we had not yet seen it, Star Trek 09. And yes, they were producers. And yes, they were officing as producers. But they took off their producer hats and came out and walked the picket line for a while as on their wearing their rider hat, wearing their WGA cap. So it was awesome that we had everybody from Harlan and David all the way to Bob and Alex, and so many in between. Let me just read you this list from back in the day, and just imagine this. And I think I published these as order. So I mentioned Bob and Alex. I mentioned Harlan. Now Dorothy Fontana was traveling, and she said if I was there, I would be there. They had some no shows, like some of the roasters. So Ira was there. We interviewed Ira, Ron, Hans Beimler, Narang Shankar, who was still on CSI. The Expanse was a gleam in his eye then. But in fact, Narang wore his TNG crew jacket with Narang over here. So Wolfie, Robert Hewitt Wolf, Hans Beimler, Bradley Thompson, and David Weddle from DS9, and Rob Dougherty, who had been Ken Biller's assistant on Voyager, but who was striking out on his own, and of course wound up running his own shows. Renee Echeverria had we were very thorough. Renee Echeverria had a family illness and could not be there. Then on down the line from like the Enterprise era, we had Gar and Judy Reed Stevens, Chris Black, Andre Bermanis, Mike Sussman, Phyllis Strong, Fred Decker, and from the first season, Fred Decker and Andre and Maria Jacquemin. And then that was kind of the writers. Now look, also Dennis Danger Madelone, and Tom Morga, stunt guys, Jim Vanover, Alan Kobayashi, Mike and Denise Sakuda, and Juan Fernandez, who's an aspiring writer and had been writing art department folks, and Ron B. Moore, effects Ron, not right, as well as writer Ron. But Ron was there entertaining along with Vaughn Armstrong and Steve Rankin, because this was one of the first year or so of the Enterprise Blues Band. The Enterprise Blues Band sang up in the corner next to the gate and entertained everybody for a good long while. But then talk about cast. Yes, George and Nichelle and Walter were all there. Chris Doohan was out, representing his dad in the spirit of things. William Schallert, Patty Duke's dad, who was Niles Barris. Victor Brandt, who was the hippie Tongo Rat, I think, in the hippie show. But Brent and Will and Bob O'Reilly, Jennifer Hetrick, Armin Shimmerman had been on the board of the WGA's labor board and negotiations, and had sat through negotiations as a board member. So he was very much, let's get the workers' rights here, not have the employee. So Armin, you bet, was there, and Chase. Rene Aubergenois at the time was held up and sent apologies, but he intended to be there. Rene, also strong union guy. Tim Russ and Scott Bakula and Anthony Montgomery. And remember, this is 2 years after Enterprise has been, canceled. They were all there. Scott McDonald, frequent guest star. Mina Fortunato, one of the new generation Orion girls, excellent dancer. And I mentioned Vaughn and Steve. Bob Picardo had foot surgery and had to send regrets, but spoke up about being there. And Ethan Phillips was in a David Mamet play in New York and couldn't be there, but sent but that was the turnout. Now, can you imagine? I have a picture of Bob Orsi talking to Nichelle Nichols at the side. It was just awesome to see people catching up or saying hello and expressing regrets. And for all that lineup of Trek folks, there were a lot of people that had nothing to do with Trek. Again, they were just showing up to walk the line that day. That's where the called official picket line was as they went around the different studios. And it was just awesome. What was funny was there was a little bit of media there. We weren't the only. I'm sure Variety and Hollywood Reporter HR had stories from the day, and you could probably find that in the next day. Look at the December 11th editions and whatever burgeoning online news was going on. But it was a moment in time that's worth remembering. But it also, as the years have gone by, made me realize that was the year that the WGA got the public on their side thanks to these theme pickets. Some of the very popular shows activated their hardcore fan base, and through the new magic of baby social media, that just echoed out into the mainstream. And pretty much all of America, I'm going to say, got, not only were they in love with the writers of their favorite shows, but they got the message that this wasn't some elitist Hollywood infight thing, that there were a lot of working people that did stuff that was very near and dear to them, that created this, and that everybody saw the exciting new world of where entertainment was going and thought it was only fair. This is December 07. We're a year away from the 08 elections. This is the last year of the Bush presidency. We'd been through the Iraq war disillusionment. We'd been through Katrina. Things were in a shifty time. And I think if he hadn't already announced, Barack Obama was about to announce for the presidency. So that's where we are in historical terms. And that's where all, no one knew what Twitter was really yet. But they knew Facebook, and they knew what the power of assembling the people was. And apparently, they knew the power in getting to the geeks and using that as a marching tool. And again, the biggest one of all wound up being Star Trek. It was an awesome day, to the point where fans knew and were showing up. Some of them got autographs. Some of them hit up people for selfies. I think before we even named the word selfie, the way we understand it. But, people could always grab those shots and it's just all right there from one side of the gate at Paramount to the other. Everybody hunched in there with the Enterprise Blues Band playing back over in the corner. It was an incredible day, and we covered the hell out of it. Shot video, did interviews. I was the on-camera guy. I know we did an interview at least with Armin and at least with Ira, and I'm sure several more, and I would like to find out where that video is. As I said, that was a Monday. Just by the quirkiest of, and to fill out this week's title, by the quirkiest of situations, timing, on Friday, we at StarTrek.com, and I was a 3-day-a-week part-timer. Friday morning, I was not in on the Friday, but we're told, informed that everybody had been laid off. Yes. 4 full-time, 2 part-time. The legacy project that had been going ever since 1994 and hatched in its baby days with Mark, hatched the very first movie support website ever for Star Trek Generations at Paramount Digital Kitchen in 94, came down as Paramount Digital Entertainment in the old PDE before it was reborn as something else slightly adjacent. They're on the lot. The original owners of Star Trek Continuum, when it was under the Microsoft network and you had to pay subscription model like AOL was originally, and within 2 years got out from under that contract and just became StarTrek.com, free to the world, the way the internet was evolving. And from 96 until December 2007 was the bastion of showing the world what could be done within corporate limits, unfortunately, what the attorneys wouldn't let them do. But put out a ton of content, and the original chats we used to have once a week, guest chats with all the actors and cast, because everybody was right on the lot together. And then the fallow years came, and what will we do with ourselves? Well, we'll focus back on the classic shows and keeping Star Trek's flame alive. There were few of us standing in 2006 and 2007. The pocketbook license, unfortunately, the official fan club and communicator blew up, not because of what was going on at the studio, but because of the company that owned the fan club at the time had a major meltdown from within and basically gave up the license. Old Decipher Games. So there were very few folks standing in 2007. Well, that Friday, the entire StarTrek.com team was wiped out, and then there was one. There was basically licensing standing, and the pocketbooks license was happening. Very little. And then within a year, people were excited about the J.J. Abrams deal, but it was so coming out so mysterious and new. People had no idea the way that would eventually go, as a war between old and new Star Trek aspirations. But in the moment, the week that started with this grand and glorious day, and by the way, like I said, about two and a half months later, in February, I believe, everything was settled. The writers got almost everything they wanted. It was a bellwether for the way media was going to go. And yeah, the directors and the actors and the IATSE next contract all fell in line with recognizing and respecting new media that it wasn't just a little stepchild cast off, that you need professionals to do all of that because those platforms are going to be as professional as your TV, as your cable. It was also the time when it was heresy, but HBO, a premium channel that you paid for, was going to start winning all, led by The Sopranos, was going to start winning all the Emmys. Who'd have thought? And forget about the fact that within 10 years, streaming channels would be taking over the Emmys and broadcast would be almost a dinosaur relic of the past. Yay, Abbott Elementary. Wow, a network show makes an Emmy showing. But it was a real pivotal time. And there's something about, I remember it fondly, but if you step back and look at the big picture and connect some dots, it was a very transitional, pivotal time. And what did the Star Trek Day theme for a Writer's Guild strike, what did that say about what was happening in media and fandom and pop culture? It says a lot. It says a lot. And how tone deaf was it, sadly, within 5 days, for the entire original StarTrek.com team to be wiped out, and for the website to sit there with 4-year-old stories, nearly 4, all the Christmas December theme sat there. It wasn't turned off. For nearly 4 years, you could go to StarTrek.com and see a page that was put up in December, see a homepage from December 2007, in 08, in 09, and 10. Yes, even with the 09 movie coming, because it had its own website. And we're all divorced. All the arms of the once mighty Paramount everything were all Interactive is in Silicon Valley, and CBS is in New York, and Paramount Pictures is in Hollywood, but we only care about movies. And we have a movie website. We have some movie licensing deals we did through JJ's company. It was such a different time, so disheveled, and that blew over. And a lot of people tried to say that because we had covered the strike, that was retribution. No, that wasn't retribution. It was just blind bean counters without a clue as to the value. There'd been so much turnover. We finally got the second or third generation in Interactive that saw no need, no value, no purpose, that had no idea that licensee contracts were being drawn, requiring new licensees to have their first announcement of their license be made on StarTrek.com. So talk about left hand, right hand. Licensing was very distressed that Interactive just did away with the page and shut it down. And thus began a long-term effort to get the keys, which finally happened. Although by that time, the team had long disbanded, the pages had broken, the links had broken, and the decision was made, rather than keep up that really cool kind of post-Okudagram gleaming tech look, they went back with just a basic, looks like every other website, maybe with a dark theme, black with white writing over it. They went with a very generic looking design, gave up on the original kind of Star Trek, whatever, microgramma font, Krilly, whatever the specific Trek look to it. But now it's gone back to that. But in the first few years, the comeback site was nothing near as cool looking as the old one. But it was just, I've been told it was just going to be too expensive to go back in and activate all that content. Some of it's been saved. A lot of it's been lost. A lot of my work over the years, much less the last 2 years I worked there steadily, was gone. So yeah, it was a bittersweet, 15 years ago, it was a bittersweet week. Huge week for showing where, even 2 years into the fallow period, look at the draw, look at the power that Star Trek had. I'll see your horror theme day. I'll see your Galactica theme day. I'll see your Buffy and Firefly theme day, and I'll raise you Star Trek. That was awesome. And to see all those folks out there talking to each other and meeting sometimes as colleagues, as respected colleagues, all there for the same purpose, and watching the actors and the creatives all in support, having a fine day because they all knew it was going to be on their necks pretty soon. And to see the unions like that realize the shape of entertainment in the pop culture mindset and how to access it. I mean, it was just such a pivotal time. Such a really good time. And it's been 15 years, and I realized as I did some posts 15 years ago this day, how much of that's on the verge of being lost in the memory hole. So you're welcome, Trekland. If you are watching us later on YouTube alone, hi, welcome. You can still leave a comment thanks for diving in with us. And maybe you can join us Tuesday live some week at 1 o'clock ish Pacific, 4 Eastern, 8 UK time, 9 Central European, because, yep, we are global, as you'll see. We had global folks for us with the open house at nights. Some of you faithful were there at 3 and 4 in the morning. It's amazing, but I think it was worth it. It was just a great show. I do, of course, want to thank all of our Patreons already. Our TTL club, Diana Hopkins, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, and Marie Siegel, Keith Rombach, Justin Porteous, Nathaniel Robinson, Andrew Jazimski, Pranakasha Productions, Gay Clevin Lundstrom, and Galinda Bruton, and our live wires, Habian Gunn Johnson, Robert McLean, Alan Hoensi, J.R. Poole, Byron Bailey, Dave Gregory, and Casey Shafsky. Thanks so much, guys and gals. What are we coming down to the end of the year, the end of the month? It's just $5 and $10 if you're not aware. Patreon's awesome. You can support creatives project by project or on an ongoing basis. That's what I'm doing. I'm keeping it simple with these rewards and the shout out. Patreon.com/TreklandLive. It's pretty simple. But thanks again. It's been a whole year. We're going to go into 2023. I mean, we got a couple of weeks here left. But if you come over to the site, you can get on my list so you hear about the open house first off. You hear about all the things we're doing, and it's going to be a busy year next year. And you can see right off the bat about LA Away Days, which is for the cruisers leaving from LA in February, but also for anybody on February 23rd, the day before they leave, or March 3rd, the day after disembarkation. It's our treks, our Trekland treks that we go to location sites and give you all the information you could ever want and support you on your cosplay, on your whatever your doodads are. You have action figures for photos. You have stuffed animals you need in the photos. I have done it all with folks taking custom Trekland treks, but this is a preset. We'll have the transportation in and out of Hollywood. And in July, it'll be an even bigger in partnership, as I do for Geek Nation Tours, Terrace Cassidy. July is a big 10-day standalone LA and San Francisco film sites trek place with a different celebrity with us every day. We've got 4 up so far. More are coming after the first of the year, if not sooner. You want to look at that. All of this, get to LarryNemecek.com. You can get on my list. You can find out about that. And you can also see the gifts we've got up this year for Christmas. I jumped into Cameo. So if you need Dr. McCoy, if you need Will Rogers, send me a script. We can do happy birthday greetings. We can do happy anniversary, Merry Christmas. If you want me to read something, I'll read something prepared. You want to surprise somebody. And there's millions of people on Cameo, and it's not just Trek. There's all kinds of actors. There's authors. There's sports figures. Well, anybody you would want to give as a special, and the prices are all over the place too. There's even like a text option if you want to just text somebody and have a text back. Anyway, Cameo is new. There's also our TeePublic store, so the T-shirts, the computer bags, right? Cups, all that stuff, all the bling. You can get it our TeePublic shop. It's Trekland Shop at tpublic.com, or just look up Star Trek and you'll find me. That's all up there, and you can get the links there at the front page too of LarryNemecek.com. Oh, I had one little souvenir. I was going to show you this. This is so funny. We had this was the group card. We all had our individual cards, but this was the old site production team for StarTrek.com. And there's the microgram kind of fat, bold, extended font that was on the site, but it's a magnet. It's a magnet for your kitchen. So, once you encountered one of the old StarTrek.com team, you could take us home to your fridge. Yeah. We had a reunion about 10 years ago. We celebrated, we kind of bittersweetly celebrated the layoff. It was silly. Right when Star Trek needed all the help it could get to stay in the public eye and not fall victim to the fallow year's worst effects, we were gone. So it was left up to what licensing could scrape together there for a while on the legacy shows, increasingly with no help from the first movie folks. And then finally, that kicked in. And yes, and then within another year, Star Trek: The Experience was gone. So it was really, really a downtime. That's why, in hindsight, that Star Trek day at the Star Trek at the picket lines, Star Trek for the WGA, including the T-shirts that had the quote from Spock on the front or on the back, Trekkies support the WGA, was so awesome. And I've got those pictures are at my Instagram site too, if you want to see them. And I think they're reflected over at Trekland Facebook right here. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us and all of that. The Trek Files is also up. Got another great look at early TNG through the lens that good friend, longtime assistant director, now teaches at the New York Film Academy in LA here at Burbank, Mike Demerit. So many stories and memories. We reflect on a couple of very early Gene's first thoughts about TNG. This week's episode on the Trek Files. You can be a Trekophile too. Check it out. Trekophile spelled with an F, of course. At our page on the Trek Files on Facebook. That's where the doc is. All the Roddenberry podcasts are at podcast.roddenberry.com. Just was happy to be part of the Mission Log Live holiday party last night. That was a lot of fun. A lot of people coming and going in about an hour, overtime to 15 minutes. A lot of overtime activity going lately. And of course, around the tubes, you can catch me, Larry Nemecek, on Twitter and Mastodon. I really need to update this. Larry Nemecek's Trekland right here at YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Same thing on Instagram and, of course, Facebook. And portal47.net. And you know what? If you catch the recording on Facebook of Open House Night and on YouTube, it's there. If you want to see what I specially offered the folks, a special offer on Portal 47 that night for 24 hours, if I see anyone pop up with it right now, I'll know you heard me here, and I'll honor that. All right? Little special 47 package this year. Folks, so glad to see everybody. Hope everybody's staying safe this holiday season. If that's a holiday where you are, some way or another, it winds up being a holiday time of year for just about everybody anywhere. So those numbers are rising. Please stay healthy, do all the things. The crazy is rising as we monitor it. So please stay woke, stay awake, check the sources. I think the fake accounts are on the rise again. Yeah. Trek well, everybody.